Emails are the most common form of professional communication that we use today. They have the advantage of being fast, being convenient, and being environmentally friendly. But there's a lot of confusion around writing emails, especially when it comes to formal versus informal emails. What is the difference between a formal and an informal email? When should you use a formal versus an informal email? How do you start writing a formal or an informal email? All of these questions and more I'm going to answer in this video. What is the difference between a formal and an informal email? Business emails can be formal or informal, and you've probably used both types of these emails. The main difference between the two comes down to the overall tone of the email. Formal emails use a standard or proper English. Informal emails use a more casual and colloquial language. For example, "Dear Miss Brown, I'm following up to confirm XYZ." This is an example of a formal email versus "Hey dude, I'm still waiting for you to reply to me" is an example of an informal email. To identify whether an email is formal or informal, you need to get an idea or a picture of the overall tone of the email. I'll go through some examples a bit later in this video. When should you use formal emails? Even though email writing has evolved a lot over time, formal emails are still very common today. And a lot of the emails that I write as a leadership coach are more on the formal side. So when should you use formal emails? Well, this is the guideline that I generally follow. When you're contacting somebody new for the very first time, use a formal email. The reason for this is you don't know how formal that person is or how formal they expect you to be. So I would err on the side of caution here and begin your email conversation off on the formal side. You can always switch to informal later on. When you want to convey respect to somebody, this could be upper level management in your company or an important client that you want to contact. But remember, if you have exchanged emails with that person before and they have been more on the informal side, don't switch to formal because that's going to make you look weird. It will change the dynamics of the relationship and it could damage it. When you're emailing somebody from a formal culture, so if the recipient of your email is somebody from a formal culture and they expect you to be formal in your email, then write a formal email. This will be appreciated and you will look like somebody who respects that culture. When you're angry with someone, I know it might sound strange, but lifting the level of formality when you're angry with someone can really help your message get across in a strong way. It makes you sound stern, it strengthens your tone, and it can get your message across in a much more effective way. And whenever you are unsure of whether you should use formal or informal in an email, I would err on the side of caution here and go for a formal email. When should you use informal emails? This is the guide I generally follow for informal emails. When you have a regular working relationship with that person. If you're exchanging emails often with that person, if you're interacting with them in person, then it's safe to say that you can use informal emails with them. When you exchange multiple emails a day with that person, business people are busy. Sometimes they don't have time to read a formal email, which may be a little longer than an informal one. So if you're exchanging multiple emails with somebody in a work day, move to informal emails, make them shorter, and get to the point much quicker. When you're emailing somebody from an informal culture, if that's the case, it's likely they will better receive informal emails. So if you send an informal email to that person, it can help you connect better with them. When you're emailing a close colleague, when you've already established a relationship with that person, you don't need to use formal emails, keep it informal. Now let's move on to examples of both formal and informal emails. Let's cover formal emails first. So I'm going to share with you an example of a formal email that is commonly used in the workplace. On the next screen, you will see the entire email written, and I'm going to go through the email or the underlined parts of that email and explain them to you. Dear Miss Wilson, thank you for the proposal that you emailed to me last week. I discussed your proposal with my colleagues and we would like to organize a meeting with you in the next 1 to 2 weeks. Could you please give me your availability between July 26th and August 6th? I look forward to your reply. Best regards, Tabitha. So when you look at the overall tone of this email, you can immediately see that it is formal. There is no casual language used. There are no colloquial terms used in this email. For the greeting, I say, Dear Miss Wilson. For more formal emails, you will use things like Dear Mr., Ms., or Mrs., or Dear plus their first name, such as Dear Shane. This is for gender neutrality. This is one indication that it's a formal email. The next one is the word thank you. So I use thank you instead of thanks. We're using full words in formal emails, not shortened words or abbreviations. The next trigger is I discussed, and I use this instead of saying something casual like I spoke to. There's nothing wrong with saying I spoke to, but I discussed is a lot more polite and a lot more formal. Could you please give me is used instead of let me know. When you're writing formal emails, could you please or would you please are more formal. They soften the request, they make it more indirect, and they make it more formal. Best regards is used in the closing instead of cheers or just thanks. It conveys an appropriate amount of respect to the other person, and respect is very important when you are writing formal emails. So when you're writing formal emails, you really need to look at lifting the level of formality with the vocabulary that you use. So no abbreviations, no shortened words, no casual words either. Try to use proper English and standard English. Of course, you need to make sure that your grammar and punctuation is correct as well. You don't want any mistakes there. And keep in mind that I have been using British English for these examples in this video. If you are used to American English, what you saw on the screen for the email example might be a little bit different to what you're used to using. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but when it comes to vocabulary, grammar, and also punctuation, there are many differences between British and American English. So keep that in mind when you're writing your emails. Now let's look at an example of an informal email. So same thing as last time, I'm going to be sharing on the next screen with you an example of an informal email, and I'm going to talk through with you the underlined parts and explain them so you understand why it's an informal email. Hi Penelope, thanks for the proposal you sent through last week. I spoke to my colleagues about it and we want to meet with you in the next couple of weeks. Let me know your availability for late July, early August. Talk soon, Tabitha. So let's break this email down so you can understand why it's informal. Hi Penelope is used in the greeting. So we're moving away from Dear Ms. or Dear Mr. or Mrs., which is of the more formal nature. You can also use hello or even hey, but that is a lot more informal than hi or hello. Thanks is used instead of thank you. Informal emails, they allow you to use shortened words and abbreviations. Remember on the previous one for formal emails, I said for formal emails, you should not use abbreviations or shortened words. The next thing is I spoke to is used instead of I discussed. Here, we're bringing down the tone of the email and making it more casual. And I spoke to such and such is a lot more casual than saying I discussed it with such and such. The rest of this sentence has also been changed. We want to meet with you is used instead of we'd like to organize a meeting with you. So we want to meet with you is a lot more casual than we'd like to organize a meeting with you. And in the next couple of weeks is a lot more casual than in the next 1 to 2 weeks. It's less precise, which makes it more casual. Let me know has been used instead of could you please give me your availability. It is a much more casual way of asking someone to do something for you. Talk soon is used instead of best regards. So you're on a casual basis with this person. There's no need to use formal terms like best regards or kind regards or sincerely. For informal emails, you are absolutely fine using cheers, thanks, talk soon, or best. These work great for informal emails. Informal emails are written more in line with how people speak. So if you're a bit unsure of how to write an informal email, think of how you would say something to somebody in person. How would you say that verbally? And write that in your email. How do you know if you have received an informal or a formal email? When you receive an email, you can quickly see and identify whether it's a formal or an informal email. Look at the salutation used. Are they using dear, Ms., Mr., Mrs., or your first name? If that's the case, it's likely that it's a formal email. If they're saying hi or hello and your first name, then I would say it's an informal email. This is one indication you can use to make your final decision. Look at the vocabulary used in that email. Does the writer use full words and proper English? If so, it's likely a formal email. Do they use more casual terms, colloquial terms, or abbreviations? If that's the case, then I'd say it's an informal email. Look at the closing of the email. Do they use best regards, kind regards, or sincerely? If that's the case, it's probably a formal email. Or do they use best, cheers, or thanks? If that's the case, I would say it's an informal email. It's really important as a leader that you understand whether you have received a formal email or an informal email from somebody so that you can reply accordingly. How do you transition from a formal to an informal email? This situation crops up quite often in business English, and a lot of people can be a bit confused about when they should transition from a formal email to an informal email. What I recommend is that in Western business, when you are contacting somebody or emailing them for the very first time, use a formal email. After a couple of exchanges with that person, if you detect it feels right, if you feel that person would be okay with it, then you can transition to an informal email. The change from formal to informal email, how you go about it, it's generally indicated in the greeting and in the closing of the email. So if you want to start using informal emails instead of formal, then start changing your greeting or your closing to the informal options that I've talked about in this video. For example, start your emails off with "Hello, Samantha" and end them off with "Thanks, Samantha." This indicates to that person that you want to move the interaction and the exchange from formal to informal. And a pro tip for you, whenever somebody signs off their email to you with their first name only instead of using their full name, as in their first name and last name, this is an indication to you that you can address them using their first name only. This has been a really long video on business emails. I hope it's helped you understand the difference between formal emails and informal emails, and I hope it will make your job a lot easier when you're deciphering between the two. I do have a lot more content on business emails and also business letters in one of my Udemy courses, the Leadership Presence 30-Day Challenge. I have a PDF and a full workbook that goes along with that course that will teach you everything you need to know about business emails and business letters. So I'll link to that in the description below if you want to check it out. To all my loyal subscribers, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to this channel, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe by hitting the button below this video. Every week I will share videos with you about leadership to help you on your leadership journey. Check out the other videos on the screen right here, and I will see you again next week.